For over 3,000 years, the story of Moses has echoed through history, shaping civilizations, inspiring nations, and transforming faith. But who was he truly? Was he a prophet chosen by God, a revolutionary leader who defied a tyrant, or a legendary figure woven from ancient traditions? Moses, known as Musa in Arabic, stands at the heart of three of the world's major religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yet the mystery of his life remains one of the greatest puzzles in human history. Born in a time of slavery, raised in the palace of Egypt, and destined to challenge the most powerful empire of his time, he became a symbol of courage, justice, and liberation. But beyond religious belief, historians and scholars have long debated, did Moses truly exist? Is the Exodus a historical event? How did a single man guide a nation from bondage to freedom and forever change mankind's moral code? Some see him as the ultimate liberator, a man who stood against tyranny and demanded freedom with the words, "Let my people go." Others see him as a lawgiver, whose commandments shape the foundation of morality and law across the world. And for believers, he is far more than a hero. He is a messenger of God, a man chosen to carry revelation, a leader whose faith moved seas, and whose mission changed destiny. The story of Moses is not just history. It is a journey of faith, struggle, doubt, hope, and the eternal fight for truth and justice.
To understand the story of Moses, we must first travel back to ancient Egypt, one of the most powerful civilizations in human history. It was a land of pyramids, temples, and mighty kings known as Pharaohs, a land where the Nile River gave life, but power belonged only to the few. At the time Moses was born, Egypt was a kingdom built on wealth, conquest, and slavery. The Israelites, also known as the children of Israel, had settled there generations earlier during the time of Joseph. But as their numbers grew, a new Pharaoh rose to power, one who feared them. The Bible says he did not know Joseph, and the Quran describes him as a tyrant who exalted himself over the people. Pharaoh enslaved the Israelites, forcing them to build his cities, monuments, and temples under brutal labor. They worked under the scorching sun, beaten by taskmasters, stripped of freedom and dignity. Yet even oppression could not break their spirit, and they continued to grow in number. Afraid they would become a threat, Pharaoh ordered a horrifying decree. Every newborn Israelite boy was to be killed, a command of cruelty meant to erase a people. But destiny had other plans. From within this world of injustice and fear, a child would be born, one who would rise against a king, part the sea, and lead a nation to freedom. The story of Moses begins in the shadows of Egyptian tyranny, where hope seemed impossible, but divine destiny was already in motion.
In a time of fear and oppression, when Pharaoh commanded that every newborn Israelite boy be killed, a miracle entered the world: the birth of Moses. Born into a humble Israelite family from the tribe of Levi, Moses came into life under the threat of death. His mother, fearing for her child, yet trusting in God, hid him for as long as she could. But when hiding him became too dangerous, she made a heartbreaking yet courageous decision. She placed her infant son inside a small basket, sealed with tar to protect it from the waters. With trembling hands, she set the basket afloat on the Nile River, praying that God would protect him. It was an act of faith, a mother's love surrendering to destiny. But the river did not carry Moses to danger. It carried him to his future. By divine plan, Pharaoh's daughter discovered the basket while bathing by the river. When she opened it and saw the crying baby, she felt compassion and declared, "This is a child of the Hebrews." Yet she chose to save him. She adopted him as her own son, raising him within the palace, the very heart of Egyptian power. In a twist of fate, Moses' own biological mother was secretly chosen as his nurse, allowing her to care for her child while he grew up as a prince of Egypt. From death came life, from fear came hope, and from the Nile emerged a child chosen not by chance, but by destiny. Though he was born a slave, Moses was raised in a palace. The Nile had carried him not just away from danger, but straight into the hands of destiny. After discovering the baby in the basket, Pharaoh's daughter felt an unexpected bond with the helpless child. Despite knowing he was an Israelite, one of the oppressed people her father sought to destroy, she chose mercy over cruelty. She adopted him and gave him a name that would echo through history: Moses, meaning drawn out of the water. But life in the royal court was a world far from his true origins. Moses grew up surrounded by gold, power, and knowledge. He was trained as an Egyptian prince, educated in mathematics, leadership, combat, and the mysteries of the Egyptian temples. He walked among nobles, studied with scholars, and sat at the table of kings. Yet something within him always remained different. He did not know he was Hebrew at first, but destiny is never silent. Even as he wore royal fabrics, he carried a humble spirit. Even as he spoke the language of the powerful, his heart felt the silent cries of the oppressed. His adoptive mother loved him deeply, but whispers in the palace reminded him he was not truly one of them. Moses lived between two worlds, Hebrew by blood, Egyptian by upbringing. He belonged everywhere, and yet nowhere. Torn between identity and loyalty, privilege and justice, Moses stood on the edge of a journey that would one day change the world. For now, he was a prince, but soon he would become a prophet.
Moses grew up surrounded by wealth, knowledge, and privilege, but none of it could silence the truth awakening inside him. As he matured, he began to see the painful reality around him. The Hebrew people, his people, were living in chains. Though he had been raised as an Egyptian prince, Moses could no longer ignore who he truly was. Every day he watched Hebrew slaves being beaten, starved, and humiliated. He saw mothers separated from children, fathers broken by forced labor, and lives crushed under Pharaoh's cruelty. The palace had given him comfort, but it had also blinded him from the cries of the oppressed, until he could no longer look away. The moment of awakening came when Moses saw an Egyptian overseer brutally beating a Hebrew slave. Rage ignited inside him, not the anger of a prince, but the cry of justice from a man discovering his true identity. Unable to bear the suffering of his own people, Moses intervened, and in that moment his life changed forever. He struck the Egyptian and killed him. Fear filled him, guilt haunted him. News of the killing spread quickly, and Pharaoh, once his protector, now sought his death. Moses had acted out of loyalty to his people, but now he had become an outcast to both worlds. The Egyptians rejected him as a traitor. The Hebrews feared him as a murderer. He had no home. But his journey had begun. The prince had fallen. The wanderer would rise. And from the ashes of confusion and exile, a prophet would soon be born. The turning point in Moses' life came suddenly. One moment he was a respected figure in Pharaoh's court, and the next he was running for his life. The incident that changed everything began with a single act of defiance. Walking among the Hebrew slaves, Moses witnessed an Egyptian overseer viciously beating a defenseless Hebrew man. Anger surged within him, not just anger, but a sense of justice, loyalty, and destiny he didn't yet understand. He looked around, saw no one was watching, and struck the Egyptian to stop the cruelty. But the blow was fatal. Moses buried the body in the sand, thinking the secret would die with it. But the truth has a way of rising, and by the next day, rumors began to spread. When Moses attempted to stop a fight between two Hebrews, one of them mocked him and said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you going to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Moses froze. His secret was no longer a secret. Soon after, Pharaoh heard what had happened. To Pharaoh, this was not just a crime, it was betrayal. The adopted prince, raised in the palace, had turned against Egypt. Pharaoh ordered Moses' execution. With no time to lose, Moses fled Egypt, leaving behind everything he had ever known: power, family, and identity. He crossed the desert as a fugitive, alone and uncertain of his future. He escaped with his life, but he had no purpose, no people, no path. Yet this fall from power was not a defeat, it was a preparation. For only in the wilderness would Moses discover who he truly was meant to be. The journey to prophecy had begun.
Moses crossed the burning sands of the desert, leaving behind the grandeur of Egypt for the unknown wilderness. Hungry, exhausted, and hunted, he journeyed east until he reached the land of Midian, a quiet region far from Pharaoh's reach. Here his life would be transformed, not by power or miracles, but by humility. At a well in Midian, Moses encountered injustice once again. He saw a group of shepherds harassing 7 sisters who were trying to draw water for their flock. Without hesitation, he intervened, driving away the oppressors and helping the women water their animals. This act of courage would change his fate. The 7 sisters were daughters of Jethro, also known as Reuel, a respected priest of Midian. Impressed by Moses' character, Jethro welcomed him into his home and eventually gave him his daughter Zipporah in marriage. Together they would have 2 sons, Gershom and Eleazar. For years, Moses lived a simple and peaceful life, far from the riches of Egypt and the suffering of the Hebrews. He became a shepherd, guiding flocks across silent hills and starry deserts. It was a life of solitude, one that stripped away his former identity as an Egyptian prince and prepared him for a new one he had yet to discover. But in the quiet fields of Midian, something profound happened. Moses learned patience. He learned responsibility. He learned to lead, not men, but sheep, one step at a time. The wilderness softened his heart and strengthened his spirit. He had escaped Egypt, but he had not escaped destiny. For beyond the mountains of Midian, a divine call was waiting. The shepherd of Midian would soon become the leader of nations.
In the quiet land of Midian, far from the power of Egypt and the cries of the enslaved Hebrews, Moses found something he never expected: a new life. After years of turmoil, escape, and uncertainty, fate led him to the family of Jethro, also called Reuel, the wise priest of Midian. It was here that he met Zipporah, Jethro's daughter, the woman who would become his wife. Zipporah was no ordinary woman. She was strong, compassionate, and capable, raised among shepherds and accustomed to the harshness of desert life. Moses first encountered her at a well, where he stood up for her and her sisters against aggressive shepherds.
Impressed by his courage, Zipporah and her family welcomed him into their home. Over time, a bond formed between Moses and Zipporah, one built not on wealth or status, but on respect, kindness, and shared struggle. Their marriage symbolized a turning point in Moses' life. No longer a fugitive prince or a lost wanderer, he became a husband, a father, and a humble shepherd. Moses and Zipporah were blessed with 2 sons, Gershom, whose name means a stranger there, reflecting Moses' feeling of living in a foreign land, and Eliezer, meaning my God is my help, a reminder that even in exile, Moses was never abandoned. Though Moses loved his family deeply, his marriage to Zipporah would face trials. She stood by him during his years of exile and would later accompany him, at least part of the journey, on his dangerous mission back to Egypt. Yet she would also witness the weight of his divine calling, a burden that tested even their love. Marriage to Zipporah was more than a union. It was a new beginning. Through her, Moses found stability, family, and faith during his years in the wilderness. But destiny had not finished with him. His quiet life in Midian was only a chapter, a preparation for the greatest mission in biblical history.
While tending the flocks of his father-in-law Jethro near Mount Horeb, also known as Mount Sinai, Moses encountered a moment that would change the course of history. In the stillness of the desert, he saw a strange sight, a bush engulfed in flames, yet not consumed by the fire. Drawn by wonder, he stepped closer, unaware that he was stepping into destiny. Then came a voice from within the fire, calling his name, Moses, Moses. He answered, "Here I am," and the voice revealed itself, the voice of God. Moses was commanded to remove his sandals, for he was standing on holy ground. Trembling, he hid his face in awe and fear. Then God spoke of the suffering of the Israelites, enslaved in Egypt, and declared his plan to set them free. And Moses, the former prince, exile, and shepherd, was chosen as the one to lead this mission. But Moses hesitated. He doubted himself. He feared rejection. He questioned his worthiness. He asked, "Who am I to stand before Pharaoh? What if the people do not believe me? I am slow of speech and tongue." Yet God answered each doubt with power and patience. He revealed his eternal name, "I am who I am." He gave Moses signs to prove his calling, turning his staff into a serpent and making his hand leprous and healed again. He promised, "I will be with you." Finally, God appointed Moses' brother Aaron to speak on his behalf. With staff in hand and a mission burning in his heart, Moses accepted the call. The shepherd of Midian would become the deliverer of Israel, a prophet of God, and the leader of a nation. The fire that did not consume the bush symbolized a truth that would carry Moses through every trial. This mission was powered not by human strength, but by divine purpose.
With the divine command still echoing in his heart, Moses left the quiet life of a shepherd in Midian and began the journey back to Egypt, the land he had fled decades earlier as a wanted man. This was not just a physical return, but a return to destiny. He was no longer the fearful prince who once ran from judgment. He was now a prophet on a mission from God. Accompanied by his wife Zipporah and their children, Moses set out with the staff of God in his hand, the very symbol of the miracles he would perform. Along the way,
God reassured him that those who once sought his life in Egypt were now gone. Even so, Moses would not return alone. His brother Aaron, chosen by God as his companion and spokesman, met him in the wilderness. Together, they formed a partnership destined to challenge one of the most powerful empires in history. Upon arriving in Egypt, Moses and Aaron gathered the leaders of the Israelites. They told them of God's promise to free his people from slavery and performed the signs God had given. Hope, long buried under years of oppression, began to rise among the enslaved nation. For the first time in generations, the Israelites believed that freedom was possible. Then came the moment of confrontation. Moses and Aaron stood before Pharaoh, ruler of Egypt and symbol of earthly power. They delivered a simple yet world-shaking message. "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go." Pharaoh scoffed. "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice?" he replied with arrogance and defiance. Instead of releasing the Israelites, he increased their burden, forcing them to make bricks without straw. The mission had begun, but it would not be easy. Moses faced the anger of his own people and the cruelty of Pharaoh. Yet in the midst of doubts and pressure, God spoke again, promising deliverance and revealing his covenant. "I will free you from slavery. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God." The journey of liberation had truly begun. Moses would soon witness the power of God unfold, not only to free a nation, but to humble an empire.
The battle between Moses and Pharaoh was not just a clash of two men. It was a confrontation between divine truth and earthly arrogance, faith and tyranny, freedom and oppression. Moses, armed only with the word of God and a shepherd's staff, stood before Pharaoh, the self-proclaimed God-king of Egypt, ruler of the most powerful empire of the time. In human terms, the contest looked hopeless. But Moses did not come with military power. He came with the authority of God. Once again he spoke the command that shook the throne of Egypt. "Thus says the Lord, let my people go." Pharaoh refused, not out of strength, but out of pride. His heart was hardened by power and blinded by ego. He saw the Israelites not as people, but as property, his slaves, his labor force, his empire's foundation. To free them would mean admitting there was a power higher than his own. That was something Pharaoh would never accept. So began a dramatic struggle, not of swords, but of signs and plagues, 10 divine warnings sent to break Pharaoh's defiance. Water turned to blood. The Nile, Egypt's lifeline, became death. Frogs swarmed the land. Chaos invaded every home. Lice and dust turned into torment. Swarms of flies filled the land, except in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived. Disease on livestock crippled Egypt's wealth. Boils afflicted the people and priests. Hailstorm of fire shattered crops and trees. Locusts devoured what was left. Darkness for 3 days, a silence of fear. With each plague, Pharaoh seemed ready to surrender, but every time relief came, he hardened his heart again. His pride would not allow him to bow. Through this confrontation, the world witnessed a profound truth. Power without justice is tyranny. Faith without fear becomes strength. And no empire, no matter how mighty, can stand against the will of God. But the greatest sign of all, the plague that would break Pharaoh's resistance, was still to come. The final judgment approached, and with it, the birth of a nation.
The 10 plagues of Egypt were not random disasters. They were targeted strikes against oppression,
divine messages sent to reveal the power of God and to humble Pharaoh, who claimed to be a god himself. Each plague challenged the false gods of Egypt and exposed the fragility of earthly power. Here are the 10 plagues, each one a step closer to freedom. Water to blood. The Nile, worshipped as a god, turned to blood. Fish died. The river stank. Life in Egypt stopped. Frogs. Swarming over homes and temples, frogs invaded Egypt like a living nightmare. Lice, or gnats. Dust turned into tiny tormentors. No priest could perform rituals. No magician could stop it. Flies. Swarms filled the land, but not a single fly touched the Israelites. A sign God makes a difference between oppressor and oppressed. Livestock disease. Egyptian animals died, destroying wealth and economy, but the animals of Israel were untouched. Boils. Painful sores broke out on Egyptians and their magicians. Human pride shattered by human weakness. Hail and fire. A storm unlike any before. Hailstones mixed with fire crashed from the sky, breaking crops, trees, and the gods of the sky. Locusts. A devouring army swept across Egypt, eating what little remained. Darkness. For 3 days, darkness smothered Egypt, a symbol of spiritual blindness. And yet, in the dwellings of the Israelites, there was light. Death of the firstborn. The final and most devastating plague. Every Egyptian household tasted grief, while the Israelites were protected by the blood of the Passover sacrifice. These plagues were not only punishments, they were revelations. A message to Pharaoh: power does not make a god. A message to Israel: God had not forgotten them. A message to the world: freedom is a right, and tyranny will fall. With the final plague, Pharaoh's resistance finally broke, and a nation prepared to escape from slavery forever.
At last, after generations of slavery and suffering, the moment of liberation arrived. Pharaoh, crushed by the final plague, ordered the Israelites to leave Egypt. What began as a quiet departure became one of the greatest stories of freedom in human history, the Exodus. Hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children marched out of Egypt by night, carrying their few belongings and unleavened bread. They were a nation of former slaves, walking toward an unknown future, but they were guided by faith. God Himself led them, a pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. These signs reminded them they were not alone. But freedom did not come easily. When Pharaoh realized he had lost his labor force, his pride turned to rage. He gathered his army, chariots, horsemen, and soldiers, and chased after the Israelites. Trapped between the Egyptian army and the waters of the Red Sea, panic spread among the people. They cried out in fear. But Moses stood firm and declared, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." Then came the miracle. Moses stretched out his staff over the sea. The wind roared, the waters shook, and suddenly the sea split in two. Towering walls of water rose on both sides, and a dry path opened across the sea. The Israelites walked through the heart of the sea, on dry land. When Pharaoh's army followed, the waters crashed back with unstoppable force. Chariots were swallowed, soldiers vanished, and the might of Egypt drowned beneath the sea. On the shore of freedom, the people wept, then sang. It was not just escape, it was deliverance. The Exodus became a symbol for all oppressed people throughout history. Freedom is worth the journey.
Faith can break chains. No empire is greater than truth and courage. The sea had closed, but their story had only begun.
After the miraculous escape from Egypt, the Israelites began their long journey through the wilderness. A journey not just across deserts and mountains, but a journey of faith, patience, and transformation. Freedom came with challenges. In the wilderness, there were no cities, no farms, no rivers, only endless sands and scorching sun. Fear, hunger, and doubt began to grow among the people. Many questioned Moses. Some even longed to return to Egypt, preferring slavery over uncertainty. Yet, every trial revealed a lesson, and every hardship brought a sign from God. Hunger and the bread from heaven. When the people complained of hunger, God answered not with reproach, but with mercy. Each morning, mysterious flakes covered the ground. Manna, bread from heaven. "What is it?" they asked. And Moses said, "This is the bread the Lord has given you." Every day, they gathered only what they needed, no more, no less. It was a lesson in trust and dependence on God. Thirst and the water from the rock. In the desert of Rephidim, the people were dying of thirst. Once again, they doubted. Once again, God provided. At God's command, Moses struck a rock, and water flowed out. Life in the middle of a wasteland. Battles and protection. When hostile tribes attacked, like the Amalekites, Moses raised his staff to heaven. As long as his hands were raised, the Israelites prevailed. When he weakened, Aaron and Hur stood beside him and held up his arms. Victory came, not just through battle, but through unity and perseverance. Purpose of the wilderness. The wilderness was not a punishment, it was preparation. The people who had been slaves had to learn to become a nation, disciplined, faithful, and courageous. The journey showed freedom demands responsibility. Faith is tested by hardship. God never abandons those who trust Him. In the wilderness, a scattered people became a nation of destiny, guided not by fear, but by a covenant yet to come. The greatest revelation was waiting ahead at the foot of a mountain that touched the sky.
After months in the wilderness, the Israelites finally arrived at a towering mountain wrapped in mystery, Mount Sinai. It was here that the most important moment in their history would unfold, the moment when heaven spoke to earth. A mountain of fire and thunder. Moses climbed the mountain alone, entering a realm of cloud, thunder, and divine presence. Below, millions waited in silence. The earth trembled, and a voice unlike any other echoed through creation. God was not just saving a people anymore. He was shaping a nation and giving them a divine law. The covenant begins. On Mount Sinai, God revealed the 10 Commandments. Not just rules, but a moral foundation for humanity. These commandments taught people how to live with justice, discipline, faith, and respect for others. The 10 Commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make idols or worship them. You shall not misuse the name of God. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and mother. You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet what belongs to others. These were more than commandments. They were a covenant, a binding promise between God and His people. Through Moses, God offered guidance for a righteous life and a just society. A law for all time. The 10 Commandments became the foundation of morality, law, human rights, and civilization itself.
From Mount Sinai, light spread into history. The voice that spoke from the fire still echoes today, reminding humanity that true freedom is built on justice, faith, and responsibility. This was not merely a law, it was a revelation.
While Moses was still on Mount Sinai, receiving the divine commandments, the people below grew impatient. Days turned into weeks, and doubt began to poison their hearts. They feared Moses would never return. Fear turned into rebellion. A moment of weakness. Under pressure from the crowd, Aaron, the brother of Moses, gave in. He collected gold from the people, earrings, jewelry, ornaments. From this gold, he shaped an idol, a golden calf. The people gathered around it and declared, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of Egypt." They danced, celebrated, and worshipped the false idol. In a moment of weakness, they turned away from the God who had freed them from slavery and shown them miracle after miracle. Moses returned. When Moses descended from the mountain, carrying the stone tablets engraved by the hand of God, he saw the betrayal with his own eyes. The sight filled him with righteous anger. He smashed the tablets upon the ground, symbols of a broken covenant. Moses confronted the people and destroyed the golden calf, grinding it into powder. But judgment alone was not enough. The nation had sinned, and their future now hung in the balance. A plea for mercy. Despite their betrayal, Moses did not abandon his people. He climbed Mount Sinai once again and prayed, "Lord, forgive them. If not, then erase my name from your book." It was one of the greatest acts of leadership and love ever recorded. Moses was willing to sacrifice himself to save others. Divine forgiveness. God heard his plea and forgave the people, but not without consequences. Trust had been broken, and Israel had to learn that faith requires loyalty. Yet even after betrayal, there was mercy. The covenant was renewed. The journey continued. The people were reminded that faith must stand firm in times of doubt. Idolatry destroys the soul. True leadership stands between justice and mercy. God's forgiveness is always greater than human failure. From the ashes of betrayal came a new beginning.
Leading a nation of millions through a barren wilderness was not a journey of glory. It was a test of patience, faith, and unbreakable resolve. Moses was not guiding an army or a kingdom, but a people wounded by slavery and afraid of freedom. They carried not only tents and belongings, but also fear, anger, and doubt. A nation quick to complain. Despite witnessing miracles, the parting of the Red Sea, manna from heaven, water from rocks, the Israelites often complained, "Why did you bring us here to die? We were better off in Egypt. Where is God now?" Every challenge became a reason for rebellion. They doubted Moses. They doubted God. Again and again, Moses stood alone between faith and chaos. The burden of leadership. Moses felt the crushing weight of responsibility. He cried out to God, "These people are too heavy for me to carry." He faced hunger and thirst riots, tribal disputes, rebellion against authority, jealousy and betrayal from his own people. Long years with no destination in sight. Yet through it all, Moses remained patient. He did not lead with anger or pride. He led with humility, relying not on his own strength, but on God's guidance. Wisdom from above. To help Moses, his father-in-law Jethro advised him to appoint leaders over groups of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. This was one of the earliest models of organized leadership and justice. Moses learned that great leadership is not about control. It's about responsibility, delegation, and trust. A nation of faith. Moses faced complaints, rebellion, and even attempts to overthrow him, but he never gave up. His mission was not to be loved, it was to be faithful. He taught the world this timeless lesson. Leadership is not about power, it is about serving a higher purpose, even when those you lead don't understand. Guiding a stubborn nation through a wilderness was the price Moses paid to build a nation of destiny.
Moses is remembered not only as a prophet and liberator, but as the great lawgiver, the man through whom divine law entered human history. From the flames of Mount Sinai came not just commandments, but a moral blueprint that would shape civilizations for thousands of years. The covenant with God. On Mount Sinai, Moses stood alone in the cloud of divine glory. There, God established a sacred covenant with the Israelites. God would be their protector and guide. They would be His chosen people. They would live by His divine law. This covenant was sealed not with wealth or armies, but with faith and obedience. The 10 Commandments, foundation of morality. The laws Moses brought down were unlike any before them. They spoke of justice, personal responsibility, and human dignity. The 10 Commandments forbade murder, theft, and oppression. They honored family, truth, and loyalty. They placed God above idols and conscience above desire. These laws were not just religious, they became the moral foundation of Western legal systems, influencing Judaism, Christianity, and Islam alike. Justice with mercy. Moses organized a system of law and judgment. He appointed judges so every person, rich or poor, could seek justice. Yet his laws balanced justice with compassion. Protect the orphan and widow. Care for the stranger and refugee. Do not oppress servants. Love your neighbor as yourself. This was not law for domination, but law for righteousness. Faith in action. For Moses, the law was not a political tool, it was a way of life. It taught gratitude, humility, and worship. It bound families and tribes together. It reminded people that freedom must be guided by morality, or it collapses into chaos. The legacy of the lawgiver. From Sinai to today, the legacy of Moses remains unmatched. His laws became the voice of moral conscience in human history. His covenant became a symbol of hope and faith, and his message still speaks. A nation cannot survive by power alone. It must be built on justice, truth, and obedience to God. Moses did more than lead a people. He gave humanity the law, and with it a path to live with honor.
For centuries, the Israelites had lived as slaves in Egypt, their future uncertain and their identity nearly lost. But God gave them a promise, a land of their own, a homeland of freedom and faith. This land, often called Canaan or the Promised Land, became the symbol of hope, destiny, and divine fulfillment. A covenant of faith. The promise of the Holy Land was not new. It was first given to Abraham, then renewed with Isaac and Jacob. Now, through Moses, God reminded the Israelites, "I will bring you to the land I swore to give your ancestors, a land flowing with milk and honey." This was more than a territory, it was a covenant. To inherit it, the Israelites had to trust God completely and walk in obedience. A journey of testing. Across the Red Sea, they saw miracles. Through the desert, they faced hunger and fear. At times, they doubted, complaining and rebelling. Yet God remained patient, providing manna, water, and guidance. The Promised Land was not just a destination, it was a test of the heart to prove their trust, patience, and loyalty. Spiritual meaning of the promise.
The Holy Land symbolized symbol, meaning, hope, a future beyond slavery, freedom, a nation under God, not Pharaoh, identity, a people chosen for a purpose, faith, trusting God even without seeing. God wasn't just giving them land, He was giving them a mission to build a nation based on faith, justice, and divine law. Only through obedience. Before entering the land, God warned, "Do not forget the Lord your God." The promise came with responsibility. Follow the commandments. Avoid injustice and pride. Worship God alone. Keep faith alive through generations. The Holy Land was a gift, but one that required obedience to protect it. The unfinished journey. Ironically, Moses himself would not enter the Promised Land. From Mount Nebo, he saw it from afar, but his mission was to lead the people to faith, not to claim land for himself. The promise would be fulfilled, but only when the people were ready. Legacy of the promise. The promise of the Holy Land became one of history's most powerful symbols of hope. For believers across ages, it represents vac, freedom after suffering, vac, faith rewarded, vac, destiny guided by God, vac, the power of perseverance. Even today, it continues to remind humanity. Great promises are fulfilled only by those who walk with faith and obey with patience.
After leading his people through slavery, miracles, rebellion, and revelation, Moses reached the final chapter of his life. He was not only a prophet, he was a leader, a lawgiver, and a servant of God. But like every human being, his journey had an end. A glimpse of the Promised Land. After 40 long years in the wilderness, the Israelites finally stood near the Promised Land. But Moses, who had carried the burden of leadership all those years, was told by God that he would not enter it. Because of a moment of disobedience at Meribah, where he struck the rock instead of speaking to it as God had commanded, he was only allowed to see the land from afar. God told him, "You shall see the land before you, but you shall not go there." From Mount Nebo, overlooking the Jordan River, Moses saw the valleys and mountains of Canaan, the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. A life completed, not lost. Moses died there, on the mountain, at the age of 120. Scripture says, his eyesight had not dimmed, his strength had not weakened. He died peacefully in God's presence. No one witnessed his burial. God himself buried Moses in an unknown grave. To this day, the location remains a mystery. A leader like no other. Moses left behind more than a nation. He left a spiritual legacy. Through him, God gave humanity the 10 Commandments, the law of God, teachings about faith, justice, and morality, the story of freedom through belief. The scriptures say, "There has never arisen another prophet like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face." A legacy of faith. Though he never stepped into the Promised Land, Moses fulfilled his mission. His journey was not about reaching a destination, but guiding others toward faith and obedience. He showed the world that one person can challenge a tyrant. Freedom is both a gift and a responsibility. Faith may be tested, but God never abandons his people. True leadership is service, sacrifice, and courage. The journey continues. The death of Moses was not the end, but a transition. Leadership passed to Joshua, and the promise of God continued. Moses' life still stands as a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that even if we do not see the final result, our efforts still shape history. Moses did not die as a king, but as a servant of God beloved by history and honored by faith.
Moses is one of the most important spiritual figures in human history. His influence stretches across three major world religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, each of which honors him as a prophet, leader, and moral teacher. His life continues to shape belief, law, and ethics thousands of years after his time. In Judaism, founder of a nation and lawgiver. For Judaism, Moses, or Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher, is the central prophet and the one through whom God revealed his will to Israel. He led the Israelites out of Egypt and into covenant with God. He received the Torah on Mount Sinai, including the Ten Commandments. His teachings form the foundation of Jewish law, tradition, and identity. The first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, are called the Torah of Moses. To this day, Jews study the Torah as the eternal guidance brought by Moses, and his life is central to Jewish festivals like Passover, Pesach. In Christianity, prophet and symbol of faith. In Christianity, Moses is honored as a great prophet and a symbol of faith and obedience. He represents law, morality, and divine covenant. His story foreshadows the coming of Jesus and the new covenant. Jesus often quoted Moses' teachings and affirmed the Ten Commandments. In the New Testament, Moses appears alongside Elijah during the transfiguration of Jesus, symbolizing the connection between the Old and New revelations. Christians view Moses as a saint and servant of God, and his life teaches obedience, leadership, and faith in God. In Islam, prophet of strength and patience. In Islam, Musa, peace be upon him, is one of the most frequently mentioned prophets in the Quran, mentioned more than any other prophet. He is honored as Kalimullah, the one who spoke with God. His mission emphasized justice, faith, and perseverance against oppression. His confrontation with Pharaoh is one of the greatest lessons about tyranny and truth. Like in the Bible, he led the Israelites and received divine scripture, the Torah. Muslims believe Moses was a messenger of God who preached pure monotheism, the worship of one God. His story in Islam teaches patience in hardship, trust in God, and courage in the face of injustice. A universal legacy beyond religion. Across all 3 religions, Moses represents legacy aspect. Meaning, liberation. He freed people from slavery and oppression. Law and justice. Gave moral law and divine commandments. Faith. Trusted God in difficult and dangerous times. Leadership. Guided a nation through crisis and struggle. Covenant. Connected people to a higher spiritual purpose. His story continues to inspire freedom movements, moral philosophy, and human rights discussions around the world. A universal legacy beyond religion. Across all 3 religions, Moses represents legacy aspect. Liberation. He freed people from slavery and oppression. Law and justice. Gave moral law and divine commandments. Faith. Trusted God in difficult and dangerous times. Leadership. Guided a nation through crisis and struggle. Covenant. Connected people to a higher spiritual purpose. His story continues to inspire freedom movements, moral philosophy, and human rights discussions around the world. A prophet for all humanity. Though Moses lived thousands of years ago, his message still speaks today. Stand for truth, live by justice, walk with faith, never give up. His legacy is not just a story from the past. It is a living force that continues to shape the hearts and minds of millions around the world.